All right, so I'm bringing you a video right now that on the surface might seem a little late or a little delayed. However, the situation is not really resolving itself or getting any better, so I figured it's one of those things that we'll talk about just to bring some awareness to my audience about some stuff happening right now with a particular brand that you need to be aware of. NZXT's build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer, and right now they are proud to announce expansion and availability to Australia, the Netherlands, France, and Italy. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. And all builds are backed by the BLD Peace of Mind warranty. To get started building your next gaming PC, visit the BLD link in the description below. All right, so obviously we're talking about Gigabyte, which is having one hell of a month. Yes, I know this has been going on for a while, but like I said, a month. First and foremost, we're going to talk about their power supplies exploding and then what Gigabyte's doing about it. Again, not new news, but things that I think you need to be aware of in case you happen to have one of these power supplies. Second, Steve has done two major content pieces regarding this. As much as I give Steve a hard time, he is a friend of the channel. He's done a lot of legwork and a lot of testing with some very expensive equipment that he's purchased. So do me a favor, at the end of this video, go and watch his two pieces of content regarding the power supplies for a deep dive so you understand exactly what's happening, because we'll be talking about this more on a high level, making you aware of an issue taking place. If you want to know exactly what's going on in a more in-depth sort of a deep dive, like I said, like Steve likes to do, he's got two amazing pieces on that. There's also been a lot of other very reputable circuit engineers that have been able to pinpoint exactly what's wrong with these power supplies. But we're talking about the GPP 750M and the GPP 850M from Gigabyte. These power supplies have been quite the point of contention over the last month, especially when other independent testers, and we're talking about like actual engineer testers, people that are hooking it up to various load machines and doing full calculations of, you know, how much power is it able to draw, how well does the OPP or the overpower protection work, or the OCP or overcurrent protection, kind of the same thing. How well do those work? Where do they fail? What's the failure rate? Stuff that holds these companies accountable when it comes to something as important as a power supply. Power supplies are boring. Inherently, they're boring. I feel like a lot of people will just buy one that seems like, oh, that seems like a good deal. It's 80 plus, etc. rated, which the 80 plus rating and the reliability of a unit are two very different things. Although typically the higher 80 plus power supplies do tend to have better components in them, which makes them more efficient and usually better quality, but not always the case, as we're talking here in the specific cases of the 750 and 850M from Gigabyte. A lot of people might have these power supplies because they were a part of the Newegg bundle when the 30 series launched and became very difficult to get your hands on. Remember the bundles people complained about? Like, I need a graphics card. I don't want a motherboard and a power supply with it. Well, that was a way that Newegg was able to say, hey, we can start moving these products that aren't really moving too quickly, and people will buy them because they want the graphics card and they're out of stock, so we'll buy that. Well, one of those bundles specifically was the Gigabyte GPP 750M and 850M. Those power supplies have a massive failure rate, a catastrophic, spectacular failure rate in terms of fire and flames and smoke. In more than one instance, in fact, many documented instances, it is taking out components with it. We're talking about graphics cards. Steve even lost a graphics card during his testing, an RTX 3080, which he also notes is a Gigabyte card, so it could have just spontaneously died on its own, which wouldn't be out of the norm for that particular brand. So what we're finding here is there's a huge correlation between that. This particular power supply initially had an OPP rating of up to 150% power draw. That means an 850 watt power supply could pull up to 1300 watts peak before the OPP would kick in, or the overpower protection. Now at that point, if you get some sort of spectacular failure and you get components that are supposed to be reducing voltage from 12 down to 5.5 or 3 volt, 3.3, and those make their way to components that are obviously not rated for anything above 3.3 or 5.5, depending on what we're talking about, that can kill the components with it, and that's part of the problem here. But the bigger issue is obviously the fact that these power supplies have been catching fire, because depending on the way that they will technically explode, components inside the power supplies, where it becomes some sort of insulated shielding on some of the capacitors and components, some of the materials that are used in there get hot suddenly and can catch fire. So that is obviously going to be a huge hazard, kind of like a la NZXT's H1 riser cable issue, where anything that has a potential to catch fire is a very big concern. The major concern here is the way that Gigabyte has been handling this. And again, all of those reputable, and I'm not obviously not talking about me, I'm talking about reputable engineers that are testing this stuff, have all said that Gigabyte has been very non-forthcoming with information, non-willing to actually identify and be just, I guess, honest about what's causing these particular failures, and continue to sell these power supplies with now a reduced OPP down to 120%, which means that an 850 watt power supply is going to be drawing nearly 1,000 watt supplied power by the time OPP kicks in, which is a little bit more normal. In fact, some of the engineers were saying 150% was way too high to begin with. But the problem is, if you go in Newegg and you look at the reviews of this particular power supply, you will find an overwhelming amount of them have arrived DOA, which means already they're clearly not doing any sort of real testing on these power supplies to make sure they're functional before they even ship them. And second of all, just showing that they're absolute garbage to begin with. So the reason why I'm even mentioning this in this part of the video is because of the fact that if you're running one of these power supplies, you need to know you are taking a severe risk with not only your components, but also your safety. If you happen to leave the power supply on, or you have your computer on and you leave your house, you go to work and it's just in sleep mode, or it's just sitting there with the desktop idle or something, if that did happen to explode or catch fire in your home, you could literally lose everything, even loss of life, if this were to happen in this particular instance. The other concerning thing is the fact that many of these power supplies have been seen during testing to fail when only 60% power draw was happening. That's clearly below its rated number, showing that there's obviously something wrong with the design of these power supplies. Now, Gigabyte did a lot of spin doctoring, they did a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blaming of the testers, saying, well, they're not testing it in a real world scenario. Power is power, and drawing it is drawing it. It doesn't matter if it's a graphics card drawing it, a CPU drawing it, or a test station, a powered station drawing it. I'm not going to get into that particular debate. Steve, like I said, did a very good job at defending his testing methodology and showing Gigabyte what idiots they are when it comes to this sort of stuff. So head over there and watch those videos his videos at the end of this to understand more of what's going on. But again, if you're running a GPP 750M or a GPP 850M, just know that if it were me, even if I didn't have like components sitting around like I do now and I had very limited funds, I would reduce any overclocks on any of my stuff. I would make sure my system is not running when I don't need it to be, and I would source a different power supply as fast as I possibly could. Because although Gigabyte is offering an exchange, they're exchanging the power supply that we don't trust with the same exact power supply. So that itself doesn't make sense. A recall, obviously, which Steve is pushing for, needs to happen because it's so documented and easily reproducible when it comes to creating these fires and these hazards. Gigabyte is not taking your safety and your systems serious. Second of all, we're going to move into the next part of this video because we just talked about sending in RMAs. Gigabyte, back on, I think it was August 9th, 8th or 9th, was hit by a ransomware attack. It's a very common thing these days, ransomware attacks happening on, remember the pipeline was hit with the ransomware attack, government websites been hit with the ransomware attack. These ransomware companies, and yeah, I say companies, these are full-on outfits. These are not neckbeards sitting in a basement going, oh, I'm gonna try and ransomware. These are legit like organizations that are well thought out, well put together, and very talented to go into these particular companies, hack them, encrypt their data, and then basically hold it hostage for money, a ransomware attack. It's essentially like what happens with those cargo ship takeovers. You know, I'm the captain now. They're doing it with databases and networks and servers. And so it's very much similar, the same thing. I have seen an alarming amount of people since this ransomware attack has happened write me saying, I had a graphics card from Gigabyte, or I had a motherboard, or whatever it may be. I sent it in for RMA. I stopped hearing back from the company. When I do contact somebody, they tell me we can't get into the system right now. That's been going on for more than a month. The other part is the fact that when you sign up for an RMA with Gigabyte, you do it online, and you have access to a portal that allows you to be able to see what the status of your RMA is. Was it received? Is it in testing? Is it confirmed? Is it being replaced, repaired? Are you getting a refurbished unit in replacement? What's happening with your system, or your status of your RMA? Nobody can get access to any of that. So what it's looking like is happening here is although the ransomware company got access to, I think it was something like 126 gigabytes of data, 126 gigabytes of gigabyte data, it looks like one of the servers that was also encrypted and taken down was potentially the RMA server, which means if you have a product currently that was shipped to Gigabyte and it has left your possession, they probably don't know what it is, where it is, who you are, or any of that stuff because they don't have access to any of that. Gigabyte responded to the ransomware by taking the particular servers that were affected offline. Gigabyte, obviously, with how much time has elapsed now, is not going to be paying the ransomware. And it looks like they're taking the approach of just take those servers offline, bring on new ones, because the RMA system is back up right now. Like, it's back up right now. If we were to start a new RMA process, it looks like it would go through. However, everyone whose data was currently already in the existing RMA server is down because it looks like it was a part of the attack and the RMA system went with it. So a little word of caution right here. If you have a bad Gigabyte product, I would not send it to Gigabyte at the moment. The amount of graphics cards and power supplies and motherboards and whatever else Gigabyte makes that is currently stuck in this ransomware attack means if they don't get that data back, you're probably not getting back your graphics card either, at least not anytime soon, because what's going to potentially have to happen here is you're going to have to prove to Gigabyte through either screenshots or correspondence emails or just whatever you might still have on your end with the RMA number and all the serial numbers and all that sort of stuff. You're going to have to now prove your case to Gigabyte that you had an RMA. The problem is Gigabyte is not equipped to handle this right now because all the low-level customer service people have zero information whatsoever about anything that's taken place prior to them getting a new RMA server online and shutting down the old one. The question is, what is Gigabyte going to do to support these people who have RMAs that are already in process? It's not looking like Gigabyte's obviously going to play ball with the ransomware attackers. I mean, obviously, that would be kind of a negative precedent, right? If you just remember the whole, like, in every single 90s terrorist movie, it was like, we do not negotiate with terrorists. Like that's kind of the way that this is being looked at. The question is, how are they going to move forward from that? Being able to decrypt that data, it's not impossible. However, it's very expensive and it's very time consuming. And these ransomware companies are very good at using very, very good algorithms to encrypt the data and then keying them in such a way that they are the only ones that could decrypt the data because they have the decryption key. However, just like anything can be stolen and encrypted, it can be hacked and decrypted. But the question is, how long is it going to take? Does Gigabyte even have the means to do it? And then where are they going to go from there? The other thing is, like, people might be looking at this going, well, why did they target Gigabyte? Well, Gigabyte is one of the largest manufacturers in the world when it comes to OEM motherboards. They provide a lot of OEM services for brands outside of their own name. But they also carry a lot of data when it comes to microcode firmwares, when it comes to CPUs, both AMD and Intel. And apparently, this is alleged and apparent because we don't know exactly what the data is. We only know what the hackers are saying they have access to, which they have released screenshots of some of the data. They have 7 gigabytes worth of compromised data for both Intel and AMD CPUs in terms of how to hack and access those particular CPUs in the microcode. And it's a very poor explanation I'm doing here, but what they're showing is that since you make motherboards for Intel and AMD, you also need to know all of the ins and outs of those particular CPUs, including their vulnerabilities. And they're claiming that they have 7 gigabytes of data showing vulnerabilities now. So remember how we had like the whole Spectre and Meltdown and all that sort of stuff? It's kind of like more versions of that, but on both sides of the table now, because Intel and AMD have to share that information with the motherboard manufacturers because the motherboard is ultimately responsible for communicating with those devices. Therefore, they have to know how to communicate. So all that data is there and now stolen. So it's not been a good month for Gigabyte. I don't feel too bad. I almost feel like the ransomware is like karma in a way, because Gigabyte has, there's a reason why you haven't seen much Gigabyte content, if any, on this channel since I did the orange build of Skunkworks. I've had graphics cards come defective from them for review repeatedly. Metal shroud, so the 10 series and some of the 20 series cards that had the metal shroud and the 3 fans would come squashed and the fans don't turn. I've had Gigabyte motherboards that were just completely I don't want to call them lemons, but I mean, we're talking like 5 or 6 BIOS revisions before we ever got anything that was considered stable. It got so bad that we just stopped even communicating with Gigabyte because I couldn't, in my own like good conscience, even remotely recommend the brand. So it's one of those things where I just stopped showcasing them on the channel, period, because of my own personal experiences. And then obviously now with the way they're handling the PSU thing, blaming the media outlets instead of actually looking inside whatsoever and saying, did we make a mistake? And then just showing absolute disregard for the community and their own customers when it comes to safety means that I definitely can't recommend them. But this was definitely more of a PSA video saying, if you have these power supplies, for God's sake, don't leave it running without watching. I would change the power supply out as fast as humanly possible as your situation will allow. And then 2, if you have something that's bad right now and you're getting ready to send it in for RMA, I would be extremely skeptical at how well the RMA is going to be handled given their current situation, because they are still in the middle of an active ransomware attack. I mean, I cannot tell you how many tweets and emails from people begging me going, talk about this, because they've got my 3090 worth $2,900 that I can't replace because they have it, and we're talking all sorts of power supply issues, all sorts of graphics cards that are sitting in RMA and motherboards, and I'm not gonna show these people's names and stuff for obvious reasons, but I can understand the frustration you guys are going through. So I wanted to put out a PSA saying, don't do anything with Gigabyte right now until this is ironed out. And even then, if they say we've handled the situation, it's resolved, I would still be skeptical of anything Gigabyte puts out publicly because they're more concerned with saving face than actually caring about you. So with that said, guys, please head over to Gamers Nexus channel, check out his content regarding the power supplies. It's a huge safety issue, and they've done some serious legwork for you guys, making sure that you guys are safe and Gigabyte is accountable. I'll put links to his videos down below. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.